every world, there are stories hidden beneath the surface. And if you enjoy uncovering them, you're always welcome to stay and subscribe. Tonight, we begin with one of them. There is a particular kind of silence that follows dying, not the silence of sleep, which is soft and forgiving and warm at the edges, not the silence of a quiet room or a still morning or the held breath before something beautiful happens. This silence is different. It is the silence of a world that has continued without you, of people still breathing, still moving, still existing, while somewhere in the space between one moment and the next you simply stopped. Most people will never know what that feels like. Natsuki Subaru knows it 20 times over. He is not a warrior. He is not chosen in any traditional sense. He did not arrive in another world with a sword at his hip or a destiny written across his chest. He arrived the way most frightened young men arrive anywhere, confused, alone, and trying very hard to seem like he wasn't either of those things. And then someone opened him up with a blade, and the world went dark, and he woke up on the same street corner where it had all begun. This is not a story about power. This is a story about what it costs, quietly, slowly, invisibly, to be the only person in the world who remembers how many times you have already lost everything. The first thing Subaru notices about the new world is the smell of it. Food cooking somewhere nearby, the faint warmth of torchlight, the sound of voices speaking a language his ears somehow understand, though his mind hasn't caught up with the impossibility of that yet. He is 20 years old, more or less, a boy who spent too much time indoors and not enough time asking himself the harder questions. He has been pulled from everything familiar and dropped into a city that glitters like a story. And for a little while, just a little while, he lets himself find it wonderful. He meets a girl with silver hair who moves through the world like she belongs to a different one entirely. He decides, in the reckless way that only the very young or the very lonely can decide things, that he wants to help her. And so begins the education of Natsuki Subaru. The first lesson arrives in an alley, in the dark, in the form of a woman named Elsa Granhert, and it is delivered without ceremony or warning, the way real pain usually is. She opens him up across the stomach. There is a moment, they say, before the body fully understands what has happened to it, a strange, almost peaceful suspension. Subaru exists in that moment for a breath or two, looking at the silver-haired girl he barely knows, reaching toward her. And then the world goes dark and quiet and utterly, completely still. And then he wakes up on the same street corner, with the same crowd around him, the same smells, the same sounds, the same torchlight flickering at the edges of the same evening sky. He doesn't understand it yet. He thinks perhaps that he dreamed it, that the fear and the blood and the cold of the alley were some vivid and awful hallucination brought on by the strangeness of wherever he has landed. He goes back. He tries again. He dies again. The second time is not so different from the first. The third time, at the hands of street thugs who leave him bleeding slowly in the dark while the city sleeps around him, carries its own particular loneliness. There is no dramatic music. There is no slow motion clarity. There is only the cobblestone against his cheek and the feeling of something draining out of him. And then, the street corner again. The crowd again. The torchlight. Here is what no one talks about when they talk about return by death. They talk about the power of it, the ability to try again, to correct mistakes, to reach back through time and pull a better outcome toward you. They talk about it like a gift, resets, and the blood unmakes itself, and the world rolls back to the beginning. Something in Subaru carries the echo of it. The gut wound that should no longer exist still aches, faintly, like the ghost of a bruise. The cold of the alley lingers somewhere behind his ribs. He has been in this world for less than a day, and he has already died 3 times, and he is standing in the evening light, trying to breathe slowly and act like everything is fine. This is where it begins, not with power, not with resolve, with a young man on a cobblestone street, quietly shaking, with absolutely nowhere to put what just happened to him. There is a rule to return by death, and it is the cruelest rule imaginable. He cannot speak of it, not because there is no one who would listen, not because the words won't come, but because the moment he tries, the moment he opens his mouth to explain to someone, anyone, what has been happening to him, something reaches through time like a hand closing around his heart, and the explanation dies in his throat along with whoever was near enough to hear it. Satella, the witch of envy, the most feared entity in this world, sealed away for 400 years. She is the one who gave him this power, though the reasons for that are a mystery so deep it will take seasons to even begin to approach. And she is the one who enforces the silence, as if the gift of return by death came with one condition, written in something older and darker than any contract. You carry this alone. Try to imagine that. Try to imagine dying, truly dying, with all the fear and pain that the word deserves, and then waking up in a room full of people who have no idea, people who are laughing or worried or going about the small, ordinary business of their lives, people who look at you and see a young man who seems a little tired, a little distant, maybe a little strange. They do not see someone who watched them die an hour ago. They do not see someone who has been carrying the weight of their deaths in silence, alone, with no language to put around it and no one permitted to receive it even if he found the words. This is the prison that Return by Death builds around Natsuki Subaru. Not a prison of walls or chains, but of silence, of a grief that cannot be named, shared, or set down. Every loop adds another layer to it, every death another stone in a wall that only he can see. And here is the thing about grief you cannot share. It does not go away. It does not diminish with time, because time, for Subaru, does not move in a straight line. It folds back on itself again and again, and every fold carries the previous ones inside it, until he is walking through the world like a man carrying a house on his back, while everyone around him wonders why his posture is so poor. He looks at Rem and Ram, and he remembers watching them die. He looks at Amelia, and he remembers holding her hand in a loop that no longer exists. He looks at Beatrice alone in her library, and he knows things about her sadness that she has never told him. Because in a loop she doesn't remember. Maybe she did. Every relationship Subaru builds is haunted by a version of events that only he remembers. Every smile is shadowed by a death he alone witnessed. Every moment of warmth exists alongside a cold, silent record that he carries like a second skeleton. Invisible, heavy, entirely his. There is a moment in every long and painful education where the student stops flinching. It does not happen all at once. It is not a decision that gets made consciously, with clear eyes and a firm resolve. It happens the way most quiet devastations happen, gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day Subaru realizes that he is thinking about his own death the way someone else might think about missing a bus, an inconvenience, a setback, something to factor into the plan. This is not strength. It only looks like strength from the outside. From the inside, it is something much sadder. The slow erosion of the instinct that is supposed to keep a person alive. The part of a human being that screams when it approaches a ledge, that recoils from pain, that treats the body as something worth protecting. Subaru does not lose this instinct completely, but it becomes quieter, more negotiable, and that quiet is one of the most troubling things in his entire story. He begins to use death as a tool. In the loop surrounding Roswell's mansion, the pattern becomes clear. He dies, and he returns, and he takes what he learned from the dying, and he carries it forward into the next attempt, like notes smuggled out of an exam. He dies to Rem, who suspects him of something she cannot name, who torments him with the spiked weight of a flail before Ram arrives, to finish what her sister started. He dies in the forest to a curse that moves through him like cold water, finding the lowest place. He dies quietly in his sleep from something as small as a puppy's bite, carrying magic in its teeth. And there is something almost unbearably lonely about that one, the smallness of it, the utter indignity. Each death teaches him something. Each death costs him something. And the terrible arithmetic of that exchange is that the lessons accumulate in his mind, while the costs accumulate somewhere deeper, somewhere without a name, somewhere he cannot audit or examine or even fully feel until it is much too late. Then comes the death that does not feel like a tool. The witch's cult finds him and Rem in the forest, and what follows is not a quick or merciful thing. Rem is tortured slowly, deliberately, her body used as a message addressed to Subaru, and he is made to watch. He is powerless in every sense of the word, not just physically, but cosmically, fundamentally powerless in a way that strips something from him, that does not grow back cleanly. She uses the very last of what she has to set him free, and then she is gone, and he carries her body through the dark, back to the mansion, while something inside him reorganizes itself into a shape he does not yet recognize. The mansion is frozen. Emilia is already dead. Puck stands in the cold, like a god of small devastations, and he tells Subaru to sleep, and then he is frozen and decapitated, and the world goes dark for the 9th or 10th time, and he wakes up somewhere earlier with the memory of Rem's body still warm in his arms, even though his arms are empty. This is the loop that builds the cliff. He finds a way to a marginally better outcome, and in the morning, he learns that Rem has suffered the death that was meant for him. Ram attacks him in grief and rage, and somewhere in the middle of that fight, Subaru makes a calculation. He will reset. He will go back. He will carry Rem into a loop where she does not have to die for him. And so he walks to the edge of the cliff, and he looks down, and he steps off. The first time a person chooses their own death, even for the right reasons, something changes in the relationship between that person and the concept of living. It is not something that can be undone by a good night's sleep, or a kind word, or even the genuine relief of a better outcome. Subaru survives the cliff in the sense that return by death catches him and brings him back. But the version of Subaru who steps off that cliff and the version who woke up on that street corner in episode 1 are not quite the same person anymore, and the distance between them is measured not in time, but in a willingness to treat his own existence as expendable. He will do it again, more than once, with increasing ease, and each time the ease itself is the tragedy. There are 3 deaths in a row in the first season that arrive like waves, each one finding Subaru before he has fully recovered from the last. The mansion is the site of all of them. The village of Arlam, the grounds, the halls, all of it transformed by the witch's cult into something that can no longer be called a home. Subaru comes back, and everyone is already dead, and the cold has settled over everything, like a decision that has already been made. Puck is there. Beatrice's contracted spirit Amelia's guardian, a creature of warmth and softness in every context, but in this one, he is something else entirely. A beast wearing the shape of something gentle. His grief for Amelia converted into a cold so absolute it becomes its own kind of statement. He does not rage. He does not accuse. He simply tells Subaru that it is time to sleep, and then he ends him, and the world resets, and Subaru comes back to find the mansion frozen, and Puck waiting, and the same sentence delivered in the same quiet tone. Sleep. 3 times Subaru arrives at the end of a world that has already finished without him. 3 times he walks through rooms that smell of cold and loss and the particular absence of people who were alive the last time he saw them. 3 times the thing that kills him does so without malice or hatred, which is somehow worse than either of those would be. Puck is not punishing him. Puck simply does not see a reason for him to continue. That distinction matters more than it might seem. To be killed in anger is to be seen as a threat, as someone worth reacting to. To be killed the way Puck kills him, with the same quiet finality with which one might close a book, is to be told that your presence in this story is not significant enough to warrant feeling anything about. Subaru dies 3 times in the cold, and not once does the cold seem to notice. There is a particular shape of despair that comes from arriving at Hope's location and finding only the aftermath of it. Subaru does not give up. That is the genuinely extraordinary thing about him. He absorbs 3 consecutive endings, and he finds, somewhere beneath all the accumulated weight of them, one more thread of something to pull on, one more reason, one more direction to walk. But he is quieter after this. Something behind his eyes has learned to expect the worst, and that expectation has become so familiar that he wears it like a coat he has forgotten he is wearing. It comes as breaking points usually do, not in a moment of dramatic confrontation, but in an ordinary room, in an ordinary conversation, with someone he loves and cannot protect and cannot explain himself to. He begs Amelia, not with dignity, not with the composure of someone who has made peace with their situation, but with the full, ugly, unguarded desperation of a person who has been holding too much for too long and has finally run out of the strength to hold it quietly. He gets on his knees. He asks her to acknowledge him, to see him, to give him something to hold on to in a world that keeps collapsing around him in ways he cannot describe to anyone. She cannot understand why he is the way he is. She knows only that the young man in front of her is shaking in a way that has nothing to do with this particular conversation, and everything to do with dozens of conversations she was never present for. She knows only that his desperation seems outsized, inexplicable, almost frightening in its intensity. And she is right from where she is standing. From inside a single, linear life, Subaru's grief looks like an overreaction. It always will. Then comes the scene with Rem. He sits with her in a quiet place, and he tells her something close to the truth. Not all of it, because all of it is sealed inside him by a force older than either of them, but enough. He tells her he is done. He tells her he wants to run. He tells her to take him somewhere far from this, somewhere the mission and the witch's cult and the weight of every failed loop cannot follow, and he will trade everything, every ambition, every obligation, every version of himself that tried to be something, for a life small enough to be survived. What he is describing underneath the words is the exhaustion of someone who has died more times than any person should and carried every single one alone. Rem does not run with him. She sits with him in his brokenness, and she refuses, gently, firmly, to confirm his lowest estimation of himself. She names the boy she sees, not the failed hero, not the traumatized loop traveler, not the boy who jumped off a cliff, but someone worth something, someone worth continuing. It does not fix him. It is important to understand that it does not fix him. The weight does not lift. The memories do not erase. The cliff is still in his past, and the deaths are still in his body, and the silence is still sealed around everything he most needs to say. But he stands up. He goes back. He tries again. And for now, in this story, that has to be enough. There is a specific kind of loss that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with the sharp clarity of a blade or the cold finality of frost. It arrives in the form of an absence so complete that the absence itself cannot be recognized, because the mind that would recognize it has been quietly emptied of the context required to notice. Rem is gone, not dead, in the traditional sense, not buried or mourned or marked in any way that the world around Subaru can point to and say, here, this is where she was. This is the shape of what is missing. She has been consumed by Lai Bartenkaitos, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, and what that means is that she has been removed not just from the present, but from memory itself, from the living record of everyone who ever knew her, from the world's ability to hold her name. Everyone forgets her, everyone except Subaru. He is left standing in the wreckage of a victory that was supposed to feel like one, with the knowledge of a person that no one else on earth can corroborate, holding a grief that is invisible to every other grieving person around him, because as far as they are concerned, there is nothing to grieve. He kills himself to reset, to go back, to find a version of events where this did not happen, and it is not enough. The loop does not reach back far enough. Rem remains erased, and Subaru remains the only witness to her erasure, and he carries that too, adding it to everything else, finding room for it somewhere inside him, where he has become terrifyingly good at finding room. This is the moment when something in Subaru's relationship with return by death becomes genuinely clinical. He kills himself in the sanctuary, with a hardened handkerchief pressed to his own throat, because Satella's influence has made every other option impossible, and he has assessed the situation and determined that death is the most efficient path forward. He does not hesitate in the way he once would have hesitated. The calculation is brief, the execution is precise, and the version of Subaru who performs it is operating in a register that is quieter and more frightening than desperation ever was. Desperation is loud. Desperation is a person screaming at the walls. This is not desperation. This is someone who has made peace with a particular violence against himself, who has filed it under necessary, who has stopped requiring comfort before proceeding. Elsa comes back to the mansion, in the loops of the sanctuary arc, and kills him there too. More than once, in more than one way, with the particular intimacy of someone who has done this before, in timelines she doesn't know about. Beatrice transports him away before she can finish the job, and in the sanctuary he finds Emilia losing herself to her trials, and Garfield waiting like a wall he has to break through again and again, and Roswell moving in the background like a man who already knows how the story ends, because he has been engineering its ending for longer than Subaru has been alive. The deaths stack. They always stack. But what is different now in the second season is the texture of Subaru's endurance. In the first season, his persistence felt like it was costing him something visible, something you could watch leaving him in real time, like light fading from a window. In the second season, the cost is no longer visible because it has already been paid. What remains is something harder and quieter and more difficult to look at directly. He has not become numb, he has become efficient. And somehow that is worse, because efficiency is what a person builds in place of hope, when hope has become too expensive to maintain continuously. He still loves them. That is the thing that reset, and every silence and every death absorbed and catalogued and carried forward. The love does not erode the way the other things do. If anything, it becomes more concentrated, more essential, as everything else is stripped away, as the fear becomes manageable and the pain becomes familiar, and the only thing that retains its original weight and texture and urgency is the simple, stubborn fact of how much these people mean to him. That love is what keeps him functional. It is also, in its own quiet way, what keeps breaking him, because to love someone across multiple loops is to grieve them multiple times, to watch them die and carry the death forward, and then stand in front of them alive and well, and feel both the relief of their presence and the shadow of every version of their absence simultaneously, to hold two realities in the same moment. This person is here, and this person was gone, and to have no way to explain to them why looking at their face sometimes makes him look like he is trying very hard not to cry. He has loved Rem across versions of her that she will never remember. He has held Amelia's hand in loops that no longer exist. He has watched Beatrice sit alone in her library in timelines that have been erased, and known her loneliness from the inside, and then walked through her door in the next loop, pretending he is meeting her for the first time. Every relationship Subaru has ever had in this world exists in two layers simultaneously. The layer everyone else can see, and the layer only he can access, dense with history that has been unmade, with moments that were real and are now gone, with a tenderness born of loss that no one around him has the context to understand. He carries all of it, forward, always forward, into the next loop, into the next death, into the next, waking up on cold ground with empty hands, and a full memory and the quiet, persistent, almost unreasonable decision to try again. Step back for a moment from the world of Lugnica. Step back from the witch's cult and the royal selection and the ancient layered mysteries of who Satella really is, and why she gave a frightened young man from another world the ability to die as many times as necessary. Step back from the law and look at just the person. Look at what has been done to him. There is a condition that researchers in this world describe as the inability to process trauma in the normal way, the way most people process it, which is imperfect and slow and painful, but which at least has the quality of moving forward, of eventually, with enough time and enough support, arriving somewhere that is not the original wound. The key component of that process is the ability to speak of it, to take the experience out of the private interior and introduce it to language, to another person, to the air between two people sitting in the same room. Subaru cannot do this. He is not metaphorically unable to talk about his trauma in the way that many people are, held back by shame or fear or the absence of the right words. He is literally, physically, cosmically prevented from it. The thing that would heal him is the thing he is most forbidden from accessing, and there is something so elegant and so terrible about that particular design that it almost feels intentional, as if whoever built this power built the wound into it on purpose. What grows in the space where that healing should be is not nothing. People do not remain empty. What grows there is a kind of self-reliance so extreme it has curdled into self-erasure, a learned belief, reinforced by every loop, that he alone is responsible for everything, that no one can be trusted with the truth of his experience, that the cost of asking for help is too high to pay. He internalizes the silence until the silence becomes part of how he understands himself. He is someone who carries things alone. He has been trained to be, by a power he did not ask for and cannot put down. And yet, he does not become cruel, he does not become cold, not in any permanent way. He does not take the isolation that has been built around him and build it back outward toward other people as a wall or a weapon. Instead, he takes all of that accumulated private weight and he converts it again and again into motion in the direction of the people he loves. This is not something that can be explained by strength of character alone, because character alone does not hold up under this kind of sustained pressure. What holds Subaru up in the end is something simpler and stranger and harder to argue with. It is the specific gravity of his attachment to other people, the way he is constitutionally incapable of choosing himself over them, not because he has been taught that his life is worth less, but because, in some deep, pre-rational part of who he is, the quality of a world with them in it simply outweighs any cost required to maintain it. This is not wisdom. He would be the first to say it is not wisdom. It is something older than wisdom, something that lives below the level of decisions and philosophies and clearly reasoned positions on the value of one's own life. It is love in its most unreasonable form. Love that has been tested by death and isolation and the specific madness of living the same tragedy in infinite variation, and has not changed, has not shrunk, has not learned to protect itself by becoming smaller or more conditional or less willing to be heard. He is broken in that very specific direction toward other people, always, no matter how many times the breaking is repeated. And there is something in that, something quiet and difficult to name, that feels less like a superpower and more like the most human thing in the story. There is a street corner in Lugnica where everything began, a vendor stand, an evening crowd, the smell of food cooking somewhere nearby, and the distant sound of a city that does not know him and does not owe him anything. He woke up there, frightened and alone, and not yet acquainted with what the word dying was going to mean for him personally. He woke up there more times than any person should wake up anywhere, each time carrying a little more than the last, each time finding the strength to walk forward into the city and try once more. He is not finished. His story is not finished. Season 4 is coming, and with it another arc, another loop, another set of costs to be paid in the particular currency that only he can spend. But tonight, in the quiet of wherever you are listening to this, it feels worth stopping here for just a moment. Worth sitting with the fact that somewhere in a fictional world, built on tragedy and beauty and the specific ache of loving people in a universe that keeps testing whether the love is worth it, a boy keeps waking up, not because he is not afraid, not because it doesn't hurt, not because he has found some secret reserve of courage that the rest of us are missing, but because the people on the other side of the dying are still there, still real, still worth the walk back through the dark. He opens his eyes, he gets up, he goes back to them, and somehow in the telling of it, that small and costly and quietly extraordinary decision feels like enough. It feels like more than enough, and that is where we'll leave him tonight. Thank you for listening. Rest